Okay, good evening guys. Sorry about that minor technical hiccup just now. So before we move on, right, maybe I just give you a brief introduction on who I am and what I do, so you get a rough idea of where I'm coming from, lah. All right. So, okay, my name is Jonus. Some of you all know me as Pang. Okay. I've started in powerlifting since 2016. Sorry, 2013. So essentially, I have around 6 years of cumulative experience, both in coaching and lifting as well. All right, but there's always a running joke that my lifters have a higher work score than me. Okay, so just yep. So I started off with Powerlifting Singapore as a Secretary General, and in the second 2-year cycle, I served as a training director. Subsequently, today I'm in charge of coaching development and athlete discipline. So in a sense, if let's say one of you does something deviant on, SPO, I'll be the one looking for you lah, okay? Yeah. So for expertise and professionalism, I graduated from NTU Sports Science and Management, right? My interest and basically even my thesis was done on powerlifting. It started off as an interest in biomechanics, but because of my own experiences, and helping other people out, eventually it drifted off into injury management. And that's basically how I got into coaching as well. All right. So just before I continue, if let's say there's something you're unsure of, or there's something you want to clarify, or you have something you want to say, feel free to stop me. Don't take this too formally. I'm not that kind of person either way. If some of y'all who know me, I screw around quite a fair bit also. Okay, so let's start. Right, intensity and volume. Okay, so we're going to start off with defining what intensity and volume is. Then we'll just touch briefly on the relationship. Then I'll take on a practical example and explain to you about the trade-offs between intensity and volume. And we will be spending more time here, goal setting and case study, because it doesn't take much to define what intensity and volume is, right? And I think most of you guys here sort of have experimented with training programs, have someone help you with coaching, or you're running a program of your own. So this will probably be more applicable. All right. So what is intensity? Okay, in sports science, right, or in powerlifting, generally when we say intensity, you're referring to intensity of load. So essentially this means like how many percent 1 rep max. Quite standard one, okay? But there's also some people who look at intensity in a more relative manner. So if you're familiar with, reactive training systems, they gauge intensity through RPE as well. Okay, so this is more of something highly objective. 65% of your 1 rep max, RP, maybe 5 reps at RP 8, yeah, stuff like that. So it will correlate to something objective, but it scales differently from one person to another, okay? So intensity basically creates, or rather, it is related to mechanical tension. So that's the amount of stress, physical stress, that your body is under, all right? So just keep that in mind. Now, volume on the other hand, it's less direct. When we look at a lot of training programs and stuff, right, we often see the word tonnage. So it's essentially a total amount of weight you have moved, depending on how long you're looking at, in a week, in a day, in a specific lift, or in an entire year, okay? So it's essentially the multiplication of the reps and the weight you have moved, okay? So usually, sometimes we can correlate the amount of volume you do to metabolic stress. So if you're looking at mechanical tension, right, it's more temporary. Okay, it's sort of something that you may think is easier to wash off. Metabolic stress is something you accumulate over an entire training period. 1 week, 4 weeks, So the higher your volume, chances are the metabolic stress you sustain is a lot greater. The more you accumulate over time also, right? So this is the dry stuff. All right. So intensity, you can directly affect. You scale the percentages of what you do in training, okay? So it is essentially how big your training effect is. If you think about it in terms of a size of a burger you eat, right? The higher the intensity, the bigger the burger you're eating, so it makes you feel fuller, right? Okay. And of course in powerlifting, it's all about doing our 1 rep maxes on the stage, or sorry, the platform, or when you're testing in the gym. So the greater the intensity, the higher the specificity, the closer you are to doing what you do in competition. All right. So on the other hand, volume is basically a product. So whatever you scale intensity, you scale the number of reps you do, you scale the number of sets you do, that impacts volume. Okay? So if this is the size of the burger you're eating, right, the magnitude of the training effect will mean the total amount of burgers you can eat dependent on the original size over a course of time before you get bloated or you feel like you need to throw up, okay, or you put on weight and you turn into a super heavyweight like Ray Williams, okay. Yeah. And one thing that's interesting but not too relevant is when you look at other people's programs, especially when you are running someone else's program, 531, 5x5, Shaco, it helps you take a look at trends, you know, see what the training program is trying to do based on all these patterns lah. Okay. Right. So with that said, right, so what's the relationship between intensity and volume? In general sport training, not talking about powerlifting yet, preparation for competition is broken up into phases lah. Okay. So essentially, let's say for example, you are a Olympic sprinter and you are 6 months out from your track and field meet, okay? So essentially you will be working on something of slightly lower intensity, all right? You spend more time in the weight room, you know, you do things relevant to hypertrophy, you crank up the volume, and once you start going closer and closer and closer to your meet day on the field, you focus a bit more on intensity in terms of the weight you move in the strength training and also in your running itself. Okay, so even in powerlifting, which is quite one-dimensional because your strength training is your sport itself. So when you come close to the competition, this is generally what you see. Of course, it's never this pretty. I mean, like, how are you going to calculate something with such a perfect curve, right? So volume and intensity are always inversely correlated. The only time where you see both of them rise up together is maybe at the start of a very early and low stress developmental block where you're just packing on volume, okay? And how it will look like, right, will be dependent on your training goals. Like what I mentioned just now, as you can see, if you're maybe doing hypertrophy, there will be this huge gap in between and so on and so forth, okay? Now, moving on. Let me just show you two of the guys I coach. One who you guys might be familiar with. So this is what the average intensity and the total tonnage of a U105 lifter looks like. Alright, and on the other hand, this is what a U83 lifter looks like. It looks like a lot of data, but let's not worry about that first. So the red line is intensity lah, okay? And the blue line is of course tonnage. So over the course of any cycle, right, you can see the general trend for intensity is rising, while the general trend for volume is just dropping, okay? And of course there will be spikes in between dependent on what you're trying to do with that cycle lah. This person is peaking for meat. This person is just building up, you know, spending time farming for gains, all right? So it's really not that much different, all right? If volume goes up, intensity will have to compensate and go down, and vice versa. Otherwise, you'll just get hit by a truck. Okay, I know some of you guys have experienced this before, so yep. How many of you have done Shaco here? Really? What program do you do? Are you running your program? And you? And you? That's it? Okay, never mind. Okay, so let me just... Okay, a bad representation. Anyway, right, if any of you are familiar with, you know, Russian powerlifting or whatnot, this is Shaco program. So basically, Shaco is like the Russian Jesus of powerlifting, okay? And basically, he preaches volume, alright? So during his time when he was interviewed and he wrote like scripts about powerlifting training and how it should be, he basically has a lot of like example programs. So being the Russian guy that he is, he doesn't give it fancy names. He just calls it like what, number 37, number 30, number 32, and so on and so forth. So this is an example of a Sheiko program you find online. All right. So as you can see, right, it's 12 weeks. Okay. So the first 4 weeks is number 37. The second 4 weeks is number 30, and the last one is of course 32 lah. So if you look carefully at this, the numbers I plugged in, right, to simulate this is the same exact maxes as the 105 just now. So we just take a second. Yep, look at this, 8,000. Twice the volume with the same maxes that you're looking at. But of course, you look at the intensity on this one, it starts from somewhere between 78 for the squat, nearest to 90. Same thing for the bench and the deadlift. So Sheiko essentially has a lot of volume. Okay. And yep. So some of the people who have ran Sheiko without any guidance and whatnot will find that you do so much volume, you feel beat up and all that. But some of them, through my experience, don't see much progress. Okay, because one of the drivers for growth in terms of powerlifting, right, is intensity. So you can clock as much tonnage as you want, all right, but if your intensity is nowhere near what you're doing in competition, right, it might not cut it lah. Maybe you run it for the first time, a program like this, it might help you out because you're practicing so often, doing the same lift over and over again, that you just get better at it through technique. Whether or not you get better at it through adaptations is a completely different thing altogether. Okay, so this is one thing to take note of. Don't be obsessed or worried about whether or not you have enough volume in your program. Generally, across your entire lifetime as a lifter, you should always already have, in whichever program you're running, an increasing amount of tonnage over time. Can be months, can be years, depending on what your training goals are. Okay, so don't get too caught up with, oh, I think whatever I'm doing now is not enough volume, I don't think I'm growing. Give it some time, or consult someone who can help you out with that. Okay, anyone has any questions about this? No. Well, okay, moving on. Okay, so now we move on to the fun part. At the back of your head, how many percent should I be training at? How much volume do I need? Then should I be including accessories and all that kind of stuff? And how do I synthesize this and make it all sensible? Okay, so for me and for the coaches in Rōnin, and I'm sure a lot of coaches as well, we do planning. Same goes when you prepare for your studies and your projects and all that, right? You have to plan ahead what you want to do, right? Otherwise your cap and your GPA is just gonna whoop, and that's it. Okay, so how do we go about planning? First off, let's establish some understanding first. Obviously powerlifting is about increasing 1RM. Okay, I don't know why we do something like this, because it's quite boring essentially. But okay, to increase your 1RM, right, there's quite a few ways you can go about it, and this is basically where I found that can summarize all the training effects that we try to create when we're writing a program or coaching someone lah. Alright, so first things first, you can improve technique like how Sheiko does it. Repeat the same thing over and over again. You can also increase intermuscular coordination. Sounds very chim, but let me put an example for you lah. You bench press, what you use? You use your chest, your delts, your triceps, right? So those are your primary movers. Your antagonist muscles are your lats, your biceps, basically things that are moving in the opposite direction. So what this means, right, is you train in a way that wires your brain to activate more of the muscles that actually do the work, and reduce the action of the muscles trying to stop you from doing the work. Okay. Voluntary action, on the other hand, is, let's put it this way, if your body, right, is a machine, okay, your brain is essentially something that sends electrical signals of varying intensities to fire it up. To increase voluntary activation, right, is essentially how rate coding works and how your body fires your muscles. Okay, so the speed at which it fires and the size of that signal, this is all dependent. Okay, and last but not least, simplifying it, bigger muscle, better lifts. Okay, a few reasons why. Bigger muscle obviously has more contractile forces. Okay, and also let's say for example when you have a bigger muscle, the way it pulls on your joints, right, is slightly more advantageous. You can talk to me about this later, or like you can go online and read your own, but essentially these are the 4 things that I think most people believe will bring your strength up. Okay, and if you are wondering where it came from, right, you can go find it here lah. Okay, so moving on. When we plan training cycles, right, there are usually 3 layers that we look at. Okay, for sport coaching or even powerlifting, it's essentially a macro cycle, mesocycle, and a microcycle. So what this means is, let's say for example SPO is coming in March. Okay, your macro cycle covers the entirety of this until SPO. Usually in other sports it's about a year's worth of planning lah, but for powerlifting we're a bit more, relaxed, so we stick to the 3 months, every 3-month cycle. Okay, then let's say this is 3 months. Each mesocycle is probably about 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and each microcycle is the week itself. Some people don't look at it as weeks, some people look at it as like 8 training days, can even be a 2-week microcycle, so it's all dependent. When we do planning, we work from top down because it shows you, or rather you're telling yourself what I want to achieve and how I'm gonna go about it. Okay, so let's say for example lah, in a very hypothetical manner, you have until SPO 4 weeks hypertrophy, 4 weeks to work on other qualities like strength. Okay, and the last 4 weeks you work on increasingly higher intensities to adapt, or rather to be more specific to powerlifting itself. Alright, so when you look at it this way, you first have your long-term macrocycle plans. I now squat 160, bench 130, 200. By the SPO I'm going to achieve so and so and so. Okay, so how do I go about doing that? I want to increase or work on the 4 qualities that I mentioned just now, right? Okay, so these are your short-term mesocycle goals. So maybe the first block I want to work on my stability of my squats. Second one, I want to work on how fast my squats move, and maybe the last one closer to the mean is essentially how strong I can be at the squat. Okay, so when you have these goals, you can finally think about what exercises do I use. Okay, I want to be more stable. For squat, I shake a lot when I go down for a bench. Tempo, I'm very weak off the floor for the deadlift deficit. Okay, then depending on those things, right, you can start thinking about how heavy you want to go with these exercises. Okay, for something like a pause, chances are you doing 60 something percent, 70%. It's not going to work unless you are just finding variation, something to build up volume. Okay, things like those that stress technique a lot, you can either go extremely heavy, between 75 to 85%, or you can go extremely light. How many of you have done tempo work before? Okay, the rest of you who haven't, you're gonna have a tough life lah when you do it. Okay, so just a brief introduction to the rest of you who have never done tempo before. So tempo work, right, essentially what it does is you slow down the movement intentionally, so you know how you're gonna squat. So for example, if now, right, you go down your squat like this one, then you come up, then you probably have to do tempo work lah. So what happens during tempo work? You go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or a different combination depending on what you want to do. Okay, so of course when you're doing something like that, you wouldn't be doing 80% because you might just snap something up after that lah. Okay, but if you're doing something like a 2 count pause, squat 1, 2 up, can do heavier right? If it's too light, there's not much of a training effect left. Okay? Yep. So when you have a rough idea of what kind of percentages you're working at with a specific exercise, then you can start thinking about rep ranges. If you're doing something that's 80%, you're not going to do 8 reps, obviously, right? If you do something like 65%, unless you're training for speed, chances are you'll be trying to accumulate volume, practice, doing the lift as many times as possible, maybe 65%, each set between 6 to 8 reps or something like that. Okay? So, when you want to go about this, right, just now the 4 things that I mentioned, if let's say you want to improve technique, it's essentially practicing more, okay? Increasing the number of times you do your lift or number of sessions in the entire week, okay? Let's take for example, your bench is crap. You can squat 200, you can deadlift 250, you are 66 kilos, wow, your bench is 90 kilos. You can be the top of the podium, but chances are you'll be crying to sleep every night, wondering why your bench looks like that. Or some other guy that doesn't really like you will be like, so what, his bench is, yeah. So when it comes to things like this, you tell yourself, okay, I must bench more. Okay, my bench technique is not that great. So within each session, you have more reps. Across the week, maybe you used to be benching twice, you bench 4 times now. Quite straightforward, okay? Intermuscular coordination. You heard of dynamic effort training? Some of your lao jiaos will know what is a website lah. Okay, so what they used to advocate is you do something with lightweight, like 50%, because they believe that the faster you can move a weight, right, you get stronger. Research shows that they are not wrong, but the way they approach it isn't necessarily correct. So when you talk about this, right, you essentially want to use something that's slightly heavier, 70% to 80%. So usually 70% is a weight you can do maybe 6 to 8 reps with, but instead you do 3 to maybe 5 reps, because the main aim is to influence and change the way you fire your muscles. Okay, anyone losing me? Okay, so in case you don't get it lah, when you can focus on moving a relatively weight fast enough, right, your body wires itself in a way where, let's say for example you squat, right, it coordinates all the muscles better, okay, coordinates all the muscles better, and it takes away all the muscles that are stopping you from squatting. Does it make sense? Okay, anyone lost? Yeah, you okay? I can always give you an example. What's your favorite movement? Okay. 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 Okay, in the squat, the hamstrings up to a certain point act as both an agonist and antagonist lah. So basically, your hamstrings at some point might slow down the execution of your squat. So when you do velocity training, okay, it takes away the parts where the hamstring slows you down. You get what I mean? You get it a bit better now?
So basically, when you move the weight faster, you are recruiting more muscles.
You don't recruit more muscles, you recruit the correct muscles better, and basically you don't recruit as much of the muscles that you don't really need. So let's say for example you do a bicep curl, right? This thing pulls the arm up, but at the same time your tricep works to stabilize the joint. So the more you, let's say for example you take 10 kilo and you like this, okay, you learn how to fire the biceps better, or you reduce the effect that the triceps have on slowing it down when you come up. Because your muscles basically pull on joints, so when you are curling, the tricep stabilizes by sort of like micro pulling on your arm. So when you train for power, you sort of remove all this micro pulling out of the way. Yeah. Hope that answers it. If not, we can talk about this later. Okay? Yeah. So voluntary action on the other hand is like I said, increasing the signal size to the muscle. So this one is quite straightforward. Basically, you just train for strength. Okay, you train with heavier weights, heavier intensities, do it better, get stronger. Another way is to do heavy eccentrics. We don't usually see this in powerlifting. You see it happen more often in bodybuilding lah. Because heavy eccentrics sort of builds more muscles. It recruits more motor units in your muscles. So I use the squat as an example. Quads, when you're going down, when you're stationary, and when you're coming up, the going down part, okay, activates way more quads than staying here and going up. Okay, so the eccentrics will basically help you activate more muscles, more motor units within your muscles, and the signals that fire are a lot stronger. Okay, a word of caution is you can do this, but it causes a lot of damage lah, in terms of like metabolic stress. So if you're not sure how to do this, stay away from it first until you have done some research on your own. And chances are, if you are like starting out, you more or less have no business doing the heavy eccentrics, especially if you're training your own, because it can be quite dangerous. You can squat heavy eccentric, you can deadlift heavy eccentric, you can just let the bar go, that's fine. But when you're doing a bench press, if there's no safety pin, you're really, yeah, you're screwed lah, basically. Okay. Then for muscle tendon unit, get bigger. Okay, bigger muscle, stronger you. Train the muscle at full range of motion. If you are naturally benching like this, okay, then that's fine. It's powerlifting, alright. Or your deadlift is, Ashton, like that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's unique to you. But if you are trying to achieve a goal like hypertrophy, you want to train a muscle through a full range of motion. Okay, so if let's say you bench and your range of motion is just like this, you're barely using anything. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want to build a bigger muscle, you have to find a way to go from benching like this to like this. Medium grip bench, narrow grip bench, dumbbell bench. For the deadlift, deficit, Romanian deadlift, squat, high bar, front squat. You want to torture yourself some more, CC squats, put a plate underneath and go down. Okay? Right. So moving on from that, does anyone have any questions so far? Or anything they want to talk about? No? Okay. So we already more or less settled the kind of exercises you want to use and the intensities that sort of correlate with that. Let's look at rep ranges and intended effects, okay? So I'm going to show you a table. There will be a few tables upcoming, but let's go through them one by one. This is something that you see in if you have friends or whoever who does sport apart from powerlifting, this is what their strength and conditioning will look like. Okay? You train for strength, this is what you go for. You train for power, short part, track and field, triple jump, things like that. This is what you'll be looking at. Train for hypertrophy and muscular endurance if you're a marathon runner or you row long distances. Okay? So when we, apart from power, strength, these two things are quite static. Okay, you can't really train for strength by going this much. Okay, so some people have always asked, I want to build muscle. Even if, let's say for example for powerlifting, how much should I do? There's no real rep range, right, that brings about this kind of adaptations. Most of the time you'll be expecting it to look like this. Okay, that if I train for strength, it'll be blah 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 blah. If you want to train for size, it'll be somewhere here. But in reality, right, depending on the type of exercises you're doing and the kind of joints you're recruiting for the exercise, right, you tend to look at this. So don't get too caught up. Okay, some things depending on the person takes a bit of experimentation. For example, Wei Chong. Okay, you give him how much volume, right? Size being put on is always a question of difficulty lah. But you give someone else, maybe let's say Ouyang, natural man-made monster. Okay, you can give him reps of 1 to 5. I'm quite sure he'll just pack on size either way. So these have a lot of to do with your nutrition, your rest, and everything else that you're doing as well. All right. Okay. Yeah. So these are just guidelines, lah. So another version of it is this. Okay, I wouldn't want to expand on this too much. So now I go into something that's more powerlifting specific. Okay. Anyone seen this before? Philippine chart. So Philippine chart is this chart that this researcher used or coach used to find out the kind of rep ranges based on the intensity that a Olympic weightlifter or powerlifter does to create optimal training effects. Okay, this one is quite close to my heart because when I first started out in training, I had no clue what I was doing. I always refer to this. Okay, there's a lot of criticism on whether or not this works for powerlifting. All right, but my argument is it's always dependent on the individual and the kind of exercises you're doing either way. So if any of you eventually start to program on your own, right, use this. Feel free to experiment with it. You can't really go wrong with this either. Okay, so for example, within a specific day or week, right, your squat is around 75%. So you'll be looking at this. Okay, so the total number of reps you do, let's say for example your low bar squat shouldn't really exceed 24 within the session. Okay, but of course that's not really true lah. Some of us know that it's just a guideline. While the optimal amount is somewhere between 18. So you use that, you tell yourself, okay, I need to hit a total of 18 reps at least and up to 24. Then when you look at this, you think, okay, 75%, I can do 5 reps, okay, without tiring myself out, focus on technique. Then 5 reps, right? To get something near this, I do 4 sets. Okay, so essentially you do 4 sets of 5 at 75% for that session. Of course, as you grow as a lifter, it will eventually not work, even as your numbers are moving up. Okay? And another one is this. I think most of you will be quite overwhelmed by this, so brief explanation. So this chart is developed by Mike T, okay, of Reactive Training Systems, the guy who popularized and made RP training a thing to either love or hate on. So let's say for example you have a block, a training block, you want to increase your bench press strength. Okay, so let's take for example 5 reps because generally you train 5 reps, you can't go wrong lah. Look at 5 reps, right? This is essentially the percentages that you correlate to for specific RPE. So let's say you do 81% for 5 reps, it will bring you to this RP8. So what this means is that one set that you do, right, you probably only have 1 or 2 left in the tank. Okay, then maybe you repeat another set, it comes closer to this. Third set, this. Fourth set, this, and boom, failure. Okay, but of course in training you try to stay away from this lah, unless you're feeling lucky. You wanna try for a rep PR or so 5. Okay, maybe you start with 77.4% or something lower, then you work up until maybe you hit on RP9. Okay, so within each session just try not to go close to failure lah. That's where the RP chart comes in. It gives you something to look at, to plot, and basically project how much you can do a certain weight. Okay, so this one needs a bit of experimentation because everything here, right, this percentage, it might work differently for you as well. So for me, maybe my 3 rep max of my bench is 92.2%, but for Maha it may be, it is really different, hard to say, right? So how do we use all this? I'll just show you a case study. Okay, so over here we have Julius. Julius is not from NUS, obviously. Okay, so basically he's a Singaporean studying overseas. Okay, and he's a powerlifter. You know, done a lot of amazing things. Also worked with amazing coaches. Okay, so I'm just gonna bring you through how I would create a program for him lah. Okay. Okay. Okay, get it out of the system. Okay, so Julius competes in U66. Okay, and as an undergraduate, right, he has the time to train 4 times weekly. Okay, so these are some of the things you think about when you want to train. If let's say you are in Hell Week, you know you have a lot of projects coming up, you have a lot of assignments to do, then you probably reduce this to 2 or 3. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. You won't lose gains, but you must think ahead, plan for yourself. You know this thing is coming, better start planning and think about how you want to go about training before you run yourself into the ground. Okay? You know best lah. Yeah. So like I was saying, right, you want to look at the lifts individually and think about the things you want to work on. So for Julius, right, these are things that he looks at. Impressive lifts, but nevertheless we always have problems within ourselves lah. So just take note, I'll show you a video eventually on how his lifts look like. So for his squat, he says he has issues with bracing, and you okay, right? I show them a video. Yeah. So visually, so visually, right? He has this very strange lack of stability in the hole, which you rarely see in people. You know what I mean later. And for bench press, right, it might be hard to notice in the video, but what he has, I think most of us also face, right, is he has a difficulty maintaining this throughout the bench press itself lah. Slide up, is it? I can't remember. Yeah.
When on the press.
Yes, it will slowly slide up lah, or slide forward. Okay, so he will flatten out. Okay. Then for deadlift, he tells me that there's nothing wrong. When we look through his videos, right, he doesn't like fail anywhere in any part of the lift. He basically just fails if the lift fails. You might think that there's nothing to work on, but maybe next time when I explain it to you again, you will have to work on strength through a longer range of motion like I mentioned lah. So maybe for sumo deadlift, you know, he doesn't really feel much. So when you do things like a deficit, you'll start to see all the cracks come out. Okay? So just stay focused on the screen for a while.
Handsome man.
They're feeling you set out longer than you actually live. See that? Everyone caught there, right? Yeah. Okay, nice fist pump. Okay, moving on to the bench. Self rank, last one. Okay, so you can see, just look at his arch and his shoulders. Quite hard to notice. But when I look at it closely, his shoulder blades technically slide up a bit. It happens often, but of course that's something you want to improve on. Okay? And we have the deadlift.
Hip through. Straight line.
It says straight line, right? But okay, so yeah, so for some of you who are a bit more anal, you look at the bar, the way it moves, right, you get a bit of OCD, then you may tell yourself, okay, I think Julius should just pull grip, huh? But, yeah, but in any sport, even in powerlifting, right, there's always some degree of asymmetry. He's pulling 210, some of us are struggling with 160, so I think we just keep our mouth shut, okay? But nevertheless, if you find that someone just absolutely fails at the lift, right, one thing you might want to look at is you have that friend, he does a max out RP 7, then all of a sudden RP 11, he just falls flat on the floor. You always have that one friend, right? So you can think about extending the range of motion in his training. Okay, that's just purely anecdotal lah, from my experience. Okay, so if you haven't got bored and like lost me, let's look at this whole thing again. So for Julius, right, first thing I want to do, exercise selection. One thing at a time. When you look at the squat, you already know that he has problems with descent and stability in the whole lah. So when you think about that, like I mentioned just now, eccentrics, horse squats. Bench press, you want technique to be sustainable, tempo work, holding very long pauses so you don't flatten out even after you press up. Okay? But of course the pause cannot be so long until you gas out and like start blacking out lah. Okay? And of course you just generally get stronger so your form doesn't break down. Deadlift, right? Same thing, general strength. Deficit deadlifts, conventional deadlifts, opposite stance, things like that. Okay, we already picked out the exercises, so we take a look at intensity lah, right? For example, if let's say we are just starting out lah, okay, you already have your solution to his problem, which is the lack of stability. That's where you put in your horse squats. 70 to 80% of his 1 rep max, so he feels the weight, but not so light until he can just breeze through it without putting in effort. Then for the primary movement, which is basically competition squat, nothing special about it, just take away the sleeves. Because most of you who wear SBDs, you know how much of a boost it gives you. And the moment you take it away and you start doing your normal squat, you suddenly feel like, wow, my legs, they're dying. So this is the intended effect, to create hypertrophy at the legs and also to create a motor pattern, right? To be able to stop and slow down the squat on your own and not rely on the stiffness of the material. Good? Okay, for the rest of you that don't use knee sleeves, right? Basically, wearing an SBD is sort of like cheating. Okay, because the material is so stiff, it sometimes can stop you going down. It may give some people back problems because you actually have to fight to get in. Okay, so usually for these guys who wear very tight knee sleeves, right? The moment you take out the knee sleeves, you teach them how to squat all over again, lah. Okay. Then for the bench press, right? A lot of base lah. I mean, who doesn't like the bench press, right? Okay, so for the bench press, primary movement, you can always train bench heavier and somehow recover better. Tons of research on this, so I won't bore you with that lah. Okay, secondary movement, 3 count pause bench. If you can't do a 3 count pause without staying tight, uh, your technique is basically lacking lah. Okay, because you actually need to put in a lot of focus to fight the weight and keep it there as well. Unless you're the kind of bencher that goes whoop and up. Okay? Then 2 other additional movements to help him out with grooving the movement. Variable pause, so 4 reps. First rep, 1, 2, 3, 4. Second rep, 1, 2, 3. Third rep, 1, 2, and finally the last rep, 1. Sounds a bit confusing, but next time maybe when you experiment with it, you get how it works now, okay? Then for the last one, 610. Sometimes when we flatten out in the bench press, right, it could be because our bar path is not very ironed out. You know, one day you go down like this, one day you go down like that, one day you go like that, then you die. So the 610 comes in first to help you out with the bar path down. Okay. Secondly, because of the extended eccentric, right, you work on basically the muscles as well. Okay. Because when you look at everything here, right, none of this is really much about building the pecs, the triceps and everything, so this will help out a bit more. Okay. Then for the deadlift, we work at slightly heavier intensities, and of course the secondary movement of my choice is to pull deficit, to work on that range of motion that seems to be missing in usual training. Same concept as when you do a 1 inch bench press and you just fail, despite your previous rep looking easy. So you just extend the range of motion, get more training, more stresses in. Alright? Now moving on. Yeah. So you settled the first two already. You can now come down to this. So before I move on, so you kind of get that volume is only dictated by the first two. So try not to, like I say again, try not to worry about the amount of volume you get in training. Okay, the tools you use tend to be more important. Okay, because you can crank out a lot of volume, right? And it doesn't do anything. We term it junk volume. Okay. Okay, so for the squat, this is how I would do it. Okay, if it becomes too messy, you don't understand, just stop me. So let's say, for example, we have 4 weeks for Julius, the start of a developmental block. I already listed out the rep ranges I want to work with, so we look at it one thing at a time. Okay, so first week, 65%, 6 times 6. Then basically you just slowly pick up on the intensity while starting to lower down the amount of reps. 75% is still a lightweight, so we don't reduce the reps by much. Right? As for the 3 count pause squats, right, you want to ensure that he can move the weight well enough without losing the intended goal. If you give him too much, right, by the end of the 6th rep, he already down here, but he's doing this. And then when he come up, he does a good morning. Then it defeats the purpose. So even if you can do more reps, right, don't. What you want is technique. What you want is for him to be stable, hold the bracing well. So that's why we go ahead with this. And this 80% here, okay, is to help him get used to not being crushed under heavy weights. Then maybe the next cycle you can cut down the pause to maybe 1 or 2 counts, then you start working heavier, right? Then for the bench press, a lot of information, but don't worry. So for the main movement and the comp bench, right, it's the same concept as the pause squat just now. Okay. Of course, in a competition, your bench already has a pause. The 3 count pause just helps to emphasize the holding the weight in the chest, retraction, and all that. Okay. Then for the variable pause, since you're stuck with 4 reps, you can slowly bring up the intensity. It doesn't really matter because like this, you're trying to bring about improvements in technique. And the last one, same thing lah. Okay, because you also realize you do too many reps on a bench, your arch flattens out, your back starts to cramp, especially for you with those of you with very weak lower back musculature, or you start to do this, and then you lose your groove, boop, you snap something up. Okay. Then for the deadlift, okay, this one is a bit special. So for the sumo deadlift, right, it's quite straightforward lah. You just program it like the squat and the bench based on a specific percentage. But for the deficit sumo deadlift, you're not entirely sure what he's capable of because you're doing a specific range of motion that you already know he might be weak at, but you're also not sure how many percent of the actual deadlift it is. So yeah, I just put here lah for some of you that don't know how to use RPE. But let's say for example, first week of training, he goes back. He will do a top single at RP7. So usually around 90%. Okay. Then from the 90%, right, you extrapolate and you calculate a 1 rep max. Catching on so far? For example, his top single is 180. Okay. So his estimated 1 rep max will be 200 lah, because 90% of 100, right? Then you take the 200 multiply by 81.1%, that's 162.5. So you do 6 reps with that. Then after that, you take 77%, which is around 155. Okay? This is quite intense math lah. Yeah, trust me. Yeah. So okay, you can read more about this. This is something that RTS uses for training. It's called fatigue sets, right? Remember? Yeah, fatigue job sets. Yeah. So this is one way you can go about programming if you are unsure of a new exercise that you're doing. Okay. So if let's say for example, especially if you're new, right, or you've never competed before, you don't know what your 1 rep max is. You pull sumo or combi? Sumo, right? So if let's say for example you one day program for yourself a combi day because you just want to get stronger with the posterior chain, right? You can do this as well. 1 at 7. So what's your sumo max?
160-ish.
Okay, if let's say it's 160-ish, you absolutely have no idea how much your combi is. Okay, so you use this as a gauge to find out what you can do with combi. Then from there, you do the extensive calculations to get the working weights. Okay? Okay, right? Yeah. Alright. So, how would this look like when I put it all together? So, this is essentially just a 4-week block lah. Those are his maxes, and that's a RP chart for easy reference if let's say we don't really know how it works. So the first week, like I mentioned, this is what training will look like. Okay. So when we talk about accessories, right, don't get too caught up with how well you recover from them, because they are variables that you can easily add in or take out. Okay. So just take a look at this for a moment. You stack the squat and the bench together for the first day. Then you have the competition bench with the 3 count pause, and then I put a hook grip here lah. It's up to you lah, Julius. I tell you. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So when you look at all these things, right, your accessories need to perform a specific function as well. Okay. So when you look at overhead press, I mean general shoulder strength and pressing strength, can't go wrong with that, ma. You want to replace it with like dumbbell bench, by all means. Then you put in the pen lay row, right, with a squeeze at the top. That means you hold the barbell at your belly button for like 2 counts. So what this does, right, it reinforces your retraction for your bench, okay? And at the same time, it helps you build a stronger back, lah, right? Then in your day 2, you have a behind the neck pull down. Same thing. You want to train the retraction. You want to train the muscles that hold your shoulder blades together when you are under heavy loads. And the barbell Romanian deadlift here, posterior chain strength. Okay? Then you move on, you have this. Same thing, if you've been trained by me, you'll know I'm a fan of behind the neck movements. Okay? So the goblet squat comes in here to build general mass for Julius' U66 legs lah. Okay? Then moving on for the last part here, right? Face pull for retraction, and weighted back extension for the posterior chain. Okay, so one thing you will notice, right, I don't really focus much on his squat because to me I think it's fine. A lot of the things here, right, are very more or less for the bench. Okay, because when you are doing a squat and a deadlift, right, if you misgroove, you might still be able to fight the weight up. I think most of us can relate to this. But for the bench, right, if your shoulder goes, you're gone. Okay? So there's a lot of work on the shoulder blades and basically everything that holds it together to ensure that your form holds throughout all your training and also in your competition. Okay? Then of course I have the barbell Romanian deadlifts and the weighted back extension. Because we must consider this. Julius pulls sumo, okay? If anything, sumo uses a lot more legs, unless you're pulling a hybrid, and he doesn't really get much back or posterior work from just training sumo alone. He may feel a bit more in the deficit sumo, but we can't tell until we see him execute it. So the back extension and the Romanian deadlifts are a fail-safe to that. Okay? Yeah. So yeah. So that's pretty much what I have for you guys. I know it's a bit dry because it's an extremely dry topic, but hopefully you all have some takeaway from this lah. Okay? And yep, once again, thanks for having us and listen to me ramble on endlessly. Okay? And if you'd like to know more about what Rōnin does, okay, feel free to check us out here. Okay? Yeah. So before we move on to like Q&A, let me just explain. Rōnin is essentially a coaching service, and we're trying to create a community as well. Our role here is not to, create specifically like powerlifters. Okay, Maha is a nutritionist. I'm at heart a sports scientist, and I manage injuries. What we want to do is do strength training for, if let's say for example you do other sport, you know someone else who does another sport, and they are in need of things like injury management, nutrition, and whatnot, just feel free to direct them to us lah. And as for powerlifting wise, we don't have a specific method of approaching training. Maha does things a certain way, I do things a certain way. Our resident potato William also does training very differently. So if you need any help, feel free to just speak to any one of us, and we'll try our best to help you out lah. Okay? Even if it's just to chat about some things you have in mind, or like you guys that are new to powerlifting, you don't know where to start. Don't worry about me trying to hard sell you coaching, because I'm not the kind of guy to do that lah. Okay? The three of us, and even Wei Chong probably doesn't want to do that. Okay? So yeah, okay. So thanks again to Powerlifting NUS for having us here. We greatly appreciate it, and thanks for sitting through all this with me. All right.